Okay, showtime.
Hey everybody, welcome to we're going to be doing some lives every Friday, and
Not almost every Friday.
almost every Friday. It could change where sometimes we're not doing a live. But for the most part, we're going to try and be consistent on this. So if you're here, click that like button, hit the subscribe, and we'd love this to be interactive, right? So we want to do this interactive. It's going to be me and Amanda talking about money things, talking about I don't know. Who knows where we're going to talk about? And if you have something that you want us to talk about, put that in the comments. Put a question mark. Send us an email, carrier pigeon, whatever works to get
signals.
Something to get us to where we can actually hear that you're here or that you want us to talk about it. If you noticed, something that also happened recently is we switched spots. If you look in the background, this is Amanda's background. And if you look in the background over there, that was my background. So we moved offices for some things that are coming up in the near future that you guys will be really excited to see, which just means we'll be putting out better content because we'll have a lot more bandwidth. So here's the topic for today. You might have noticed on the image that we have on this video, a cat in a box. Now, Amanda, do you like being put in a box? I mean, our son likes to be put in a box.
No, I've never liked boxes and putting people or cats or anything into boxes. And I don't literally mean like stuffing someone or some cat into a cardboard box.
Or a person, which kids like it sometimes, but
yeah, but more so the cliche that represents of stereotypes and assuming something about someone because if you know this, then you know that. I've always hated stereotypes. Maybe that's really millennial of me, but it's true. And I think there's a lot we could learn from thinking about stereotypes and how we might stereotype our money, kind of like people stereotype other people or cats.
Well, I do want to go to that, again, the stereotype thing that we, and I know this for me, hate being put in a stereotype. And I wrote this in the description. We don't like being stereotyped. We don't like being put in a box. However, our brains function where we need to put things into boxes to categorize, to understand how to deal with them. And so we hate being put in a box, yet at the same time, I put people in boxes.
Right, but we try really hard not to. It is helpful to categorize our worlds, right? Like even if I'm thinking of recipes for dinner, it's helpful to have them in different categories so I can know these are dessert recipes and these are actual legit dinner recipes, stuff like that. And it just saves time. But in terms of saying because someone is like this, then they must be like that. I hate that. I try to not do that as much as possible, and kind of fight against that natural inclination. Because I don't like when people do that to me, right? They assume certain things about me because I'm female, because I'm in my 30s, because I went to XYZ university, right? Or all those kind of things. And also professionally, I don't like that either. When people find out we're financial professionals, they're like, whoa, I know exactly what you do. When it's like, no, you don't know exactly what we do.
Yeah. And I think that's the challenge, right? We tend to think that, oh yeah, this is the way it's the box again, and all of that. So, Lester Himmel is here. He asked, how do you protect your money if not in a box? Do you have a definition of risk, and how can you deal with risk? Isn't risk stereotyped?
Oh, I'm going to start with that last question. Les, thanks so much for asking it. Yeah, when we think about risk, I think people stereotype risk all the time. And there's kind of two different ways, right? There's some people hear risk and they automatically think no risk, no reward. I've got to take risk if I want a big, return. Or you got to speculate to accumulate. And then other people hear risk and they're like, I don't want any part of risk. I need my money as safe and protected as possible. I'm running away from risk. And we feel this like tension sometimes if we're somewhere in between those two kind of people. How do I take smart risk, right? Or how do I only take necessary risks? Or how do I take enough risk to get my money to grow at least more than inflation? Like people think about those questions a lot. And I think it's actually good to dive into that and not just assume it's one way or the other. Any take on that before we look at the rest of Les's comment?
Well, I think, again, sometimes knowing yourself is a very big deal. Oftentimes I kind of go back to the individual person. We want to categorize this person as poor, this person as rich, or they're this type of person and this type of person and that. What I really want us to think about too is how we do this with our money all the time, right? Because we want to categorize it and say, this is this, this is this, and this is this, to get it organized. And sometimes having those categories is helpful.
Like buckets.
Yeah. And sometimes it's not so helpful. And we want to be able to play that dance of when it's helpful, when it's not, when we're getting in our own way, when we aren't. And knowing, as we have a team of people around us, there might be somebody who is more of a risk individual. They might be their business coach or something like that, that is saying, yeah, go for it, do this and that. And then somebody like your mom is saying, no, you need to not do that. And they're more on the safe side of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, which actually, so if we're looking at like what's the definition of risk and trying to think about that, there's kind of like the risk of your money, that you could lose your money. But if you take a step back from that, there's also like the risks of not even thinking about your money, just having your head in the sand, right? And you're not even willing to take the risk to look at what your money is even doing for you, which can feel risky, right? And then other people that maybe they don't have their head in the sand, but they're doing whatever they want with their money, and they won't take the risk of sitting down and paying attention to what their money is doing and giving every dollar a job and, that kind of thing. They're just doing whatever they feel like. And that is a different kind of risk that you're taking, right?
Yeah.
So here's the thing we wanted to kind of get to with this whole, do you stereotype your money? And it's inspired by someone you might know, Les, and other people watching. You might have heard of this book called, where is this? Becoming Your Own Banker, by this guy, Nelson Nash. Here's a nice picture of him. I never got to meet him, unfortunately, but love this book. Love that we get to kind of stand on his shoulders, as well as like a lot of people. And he has a chapter in this book. It's page 14 of our edition. That's just called Imagination. That's like the title of the chapter. And it starts with this Albert Einstein quote: "Imagination is more important than knowledge." And when we think of stereotyping your money, we think of like assuming your money only can do X, Y, or Z, or assuming that just the conventional is true, and not risking using your imagination to believe that something else could be different, that what you've been told your whole life might not be the full story, right? To kind of open it up, your imagination, when it comes to money. And he tells this story in the book about it's back in the 1700s, a German schoolmaster was like all the little boys in school were getting in trouble that day. So he told them all to sit down and add up the numbers 1 through 100. So you add 1 to 2, then you add 3, then you add 4, all the way to 100, just to give them something to do. And one little boy was like done like that, like super fast. And the schoolmaster was like, how did you do that? And it turned out to be an imaginative exercise. He saw you take 1 and 100, it adds up to 100. You take 2 and 99, or sorry, 1 and 100 adds up to 101. You take 2 and 99, it adds up to 101. And he just saw there's 50 pairs of numbers that all add up to 101. And he figured out that all those pairs, right, the answer is 5,050. Like pretty easy to just take 1001 times it by 50 and you get the answer. But he would have only come up with that solution, which is now used all the time when you're trying to like do that kind of like factoring equation. Yeah. He would have only come up with it if he would have had, like, because he had the imagination to imagine something could be different. And that's kind of like maybe the biggest risk people are taking isn't in the stock market. Maybe the biggest risk people are taking isn't going into debt for every major purchase in their lives or carrying a bunch of credit card debt. Maybe the risk is not being willing to think different about their money, that they could do something different, that they have the power to do something different, that there are people that are willing to help them do something different. And that's maybe the first step that can open up the imagination in such a different way.
Yeah. What did Les wrote something else here? I think he's watching here on YouTube here. He says people like to compartmentalize, throw things in a box, which is what I said. Like it makes it easier for things like, you know, as not just individuals, but also in money. We just need to. And then we closed the lid. We said, well, I'm done with that. I don't have to open that box anymore. I don't have to deal with it anymore. It's done. And that makes it easy, right? And he says, I think simplicity and consistency can help walk people away from that limited walk, and stereotypes get altered. Can you add something more to that?
Yeah, he also, the next comment, walking with your eyes closed, that's risk. Absolutely. Not paying attention to what's going on around. Or if you're just walking down the same road every day, you never have that, you never know what's a street over, or just, you know, beyond the bend or whatever. There's some, that can be kind of risky to just live in one lane and never get out of it, or to walk through life with your eyes closed. Those both are risky, and there has to be some kind of alternative to playing with things, not assuming you know anything. Like every time Brandon and I are going to make a major purchase, whether that be new windows or a new car, like we had, you know, have needed to in the past year, we sit down and we assume we know nothing. And we say, if we're making this decision based on exactly where we're at right now and the options that are available to us, what do we do? And it's not just toting a party line or, you know, going with what our parents or our grandparents taught us, but saying, let's look at this logically every single time we come to it. And not just logically, with our full emotions too, take the time and feel really good about the decision we're making.
But I think maybe there's a couple of things where we might do is looking at it logically without emotion, and then another day or a few minutes later or whatever, looking at it from emotion, right? Because logically, buying a house from even just having this house for a year is not a great financial decision, according to some, right? It's a liability and other things. I've had already plumbing and all kinds of other things. However,
in the first year, we pay way more in interest than we do in principal.
Yeah. However, it was because I wanted it, and I knew that because of the emotion of that, and being able to play those both sides and be able to be unbiased, but knowing, hey, I want this because I want it.
Yeah. The other, which reminds me, the other like stereotype people have with their money is they only think short term. They only think, how can this get me the best results the soonest that it can? And instead of allowing their imagination to say, well, what's going to happen over the medium term and the long term? What if I thought 3 generations? How would that change my perspective? What if I thought 5 years and getting the best in 5 years rather than 1 year? How would that change my perspective? That's kind of the fun thought exercises that get us away from stereotyping our money and putting it in a box and allowing us to play around with it a little bit and see what it could do. And this, you don't have to have money. This could also be, what's the best way to get out of debt, right? What's the best way to grow my income? What's the best way to make sure my business is truly profitable? That's when you have to say, okay, there's no box. Let me just play around with it and see what actually rings true. Let me get the input of trusted advisors, and I'm gonna, go forward without assuming I know anything.
Yeah, I think about the why, asking the why question, being a kind of like a child in this and saying why this, why that. The more that we go into that, we will learn. We'll know why that's there. There's another book that I remember, and this goes into more spiritual. Richard Rohr, I was thinking about. So he calls it the 2 halves of life. And he says that in the first half of life, we create all these boxes and all these things that we think matter whenever it comes to college. And we get this degree, we get this house, and we get the car, we get all of this, and we have the boxes in place. The second half of life is realizing that the boxes don't matter. It's more about the relationships. It's more about the pursuit of those things. And that's where sage wisdom comes into place. And oftentimes, when we work with clients, the answers usually is, it depends, because the boxes are just meant there for guides, but oftentimes it doesn't matter. It's more about where do we want to go. Yeah.
And that actually, I was totally thinking about that in terms of financial goals. A lot of people set their financial goals pretty early in life, and then they assume that's how it's got to be, right? I need $1 million for retirement, or I'm going to retire by the time I'm 40, or, I want to leave a legacy to my kids or my favorite charity, whatever those goals are. And I think it's super helpful to revisit those at different stages of life to say, okay, I've been living in this stereotype, in this box for the past 5-10 years, however long it's been. Let me just throw that out for a minute and just play around with, if I were starting from scratch, writing all my financial goals again, what would they be? And let's think as far outside the box as we can. Let's maybe think about some things that are practical, but also some things that would be completely outlandish, right? And there can be some really fun things that happen when you think about it that way. And in fact, we get to do this with people all the time, don't we, Braden? Every person that we work with, we get to ask that question. Think as far outside the box as you want. What would you say are your top financial goals, or what do you want to accomplish in life? What's on your bucket list? And we keep asking questions like that until we really get to what are the things that would truly be important to them, and how does money help those important things happen? And some people have never asked that question before. Other people have asked it 10, 20 years ago, right? Other people are a little afraid to ask that question because they don't see that they could reach any of those goals. But in most cases, I'd say there's something fruitful that comes out of that, of getting those goals out, starting from scratch, getting those goals out, finding out about what's important about them, to that person, and then playing around imaginative ways to get to them without assuming money only does X or money only does Y, right? And that kind of growth mindset, I guess, is what you call it, imaginative exercise, can reap all kinds of rewards, and there's no risk in asking questions and playing around with things, other than maybe some risk that you have to think and feel a little harder than maybe we do on a regular day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and I was talking to a guy yesterday, and he has some money coming through, and his whole goal was, he said, I want to have a bigger rate of return. And I was like, well, why do you want that? What's the point of that? Are you taking any of this with you? And he said, no. And he was 71, 72 years old. And I said, so rate of return doesn't pay your bills. Rate of return doesn't do the things that you have, 20-30 years left. Maybe it's time to think in a different phase of life than where you were when you were 50 or 40 or 30. And I think that, again, those things change as we get older too. What was true for you at one age may not be true at a different age. Right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah. And then on the flip side, I'll talk with a 21-year-old, and what is true for most 20-somethings, and I've got to enjoy my 20s, right? Because I might not have another chance to live like I can live in my 20s. It's really fun to question that stereotype and say, well, what if you just decide to enjoy your whole life, not just enjoy your 20s? What would then change, right, about how you live this next decade? How could you get head and shoulders above your peers by even saving 1% of every dollar that, comes your way this decade, or, this half decade between 21 and 25, or, whatever. There can be some really fun things that get people to question the stereotype of this is what you're supposed to be doing at this point in your life, right? And I'm really thankful that I had some of those things happen to me when I was younger, and some people ask questions that allowed me not to just think about things in the way that everybody else seemed to be thinking about them.
Well, and I think it goes back to our doing this whole infinite banking and banking yourself thing that we do. I mean, if I knew, or I guess if I was a big Dave Ramsey fan, I probably would have had that already in a box and said, well, no, this is exactly what it does, and I don't want to even know about it. Whereas I had no idea. I didn't know I wasn't in that world. And so hearing that and seeing what it could do for me and what I wanted to accomplish, but it checked all the boxes, literally, for us. And we're like, all right, this does what we want it to do. And we didn't know any better. And it actually did
Any better?
what we wanted it to do. And now we go and we talk to people and they're like, yeah, well, this does this, this, and this. And I'm like, well, no, it doesn't. And they're saying, well, no, this is the box that this product is in. And you're like, well, no, that actually isn't true at all. But because they heard it on YouTube or whatever,
because everything's true on the internet.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And the thing is, where I like to think about is, hey, things change. There are evolutions of products, of people, all of that. And so how to look at life more liquid than in a hard box that we just kind of, again, put on a shelf or something.
Yeah. And then there are times, I think, in life too, not to just, close our minds to a possibility, where there might be times in life where you do just need that box. You need to forget about it for a while, where you need that. And for us, that looked like having a consistent amount going into our whole life policies that are correctly designed and all of that. And forgetting that it was there for a while, right? And letting it grow until we really, truly needed it. And that got us that corrected so many things in our budget and our business, and all those things that we just needed that box with the lid that the money was going to not be thought about for us for a few years. And that we had to just figure everything else out accordingly and to not question it for a while. There are totally seasons like that, and they can be super helpful. I just from personal experience, I know that at least one time they can be super helpful, and I'm sure other people can imagine that it can be super helpful at other times that you might have experienced too. So I don't want to say the boxes are never to be had, and that sometimes actually creating a box, saying you're going to stay in that box for a certain period of time, can be super duper helpful.
Well, and I do think that's powerful there, because when we started our business, the coffee shop, we created the business, and we said we're going to stick within this box for at least 5 years.
Yep.
And commitment is very key, right? So we committed to that plan for 5 years, and after that 5-year period, we said, okay, it's time to take the things out and see, is this where we want to continue?
Yep.
But there's a problem of commitment, I think, sometimes. And so we want to kind of commit, but also being aware to be able to then question.
Yeah. And I think that's actually super helpful to put a time frame on those commitments, to say, I'm sticking to this decision I've made. I'm going to stick to it at least for a certain amount of time before I question it. And then at the end of that time, totally, throw out the bathwater and the baby and start all over, right? To mix metaphors. And that's been true. Actually, one of my first jobs, someone there told me, you got to stick with a job for at least a year to get through all the different seasons within that job before you start thinking about the greener grass in another job and, switching things. And I found that super helpful, especially because the first year of any type of new endeavor, whether it be entrepreneurial or as an employee or, as a new mom, right? The first year has just from my perspective, it's always been the hardest. But if you've got that, I'm going to stick through this for at least a year, so I get all the different seasons, I see how it changes over time, and then I'll decide if this is right for me or if I want to try something else. I found that helpful. I don't know, that might be something for people to try on, see if it works for them too. There might be some things that need shorter than a year, other things that need longer than a year. But in general, that kind of time commitment idea, I think is super helpful. Yeah.
Well, and I do want to say too, is part of what we need to do is set those times to evaluate, right? For us, we do money meetings every quarter as a business to evaluate how the business is growing. We'll do, again, vacations or things like that are evaluating family, whatever. And so putting those, what they call big rocks, into your calendar to then be able to evaluate. And kind of, again, opening up those boxes and saying, okay, what do we want to change? What do we want to do? What are the seasons? How are they different? And I think that's powerful. The hard part is people don't make that time a lot. They assume they already know. They watch some news article or this, and they already assume everything is there. Or they assume I'm a 21-year-old and I'm going to make $100,000 in 2 years without a plan and strategy to get there. And I'm like, all right, that's not good luck. Not possibly, but you got to have actions behind it too.
Yeah. So I want to kind of start to wrap up here. We've said a lot. We've even said some things that might be kind of contradictory to each other.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
We want to encourage you to just sit for a second, think back a little bit over our conversation. What sticks out? What do you remember? What phrase or word, as you're thinking about what we've shared, what imagery or metaphor is coming to mind right now. And put that in the chat or put it somewhere where you'll remember it and come back to it. If you don't feel comfortable putting it in the chat, you can even email it to us at hello@grandmaswealthwisdom.com. Both Brandon and I get the hello messages. And just to kind of put it out there, like, this is something I want to explore more. This is something I want my imagination to work on. This is something that I'm interested in figuring out. If I need a box, if I need to bust out of the box, what do I need to do? So just take a minute, figure out what that is, and record it somewhere so that you'll remember. You'll actually, even the physical act of typing it out or writing it down will help cement it and get your subconscious or your conscious whatever starting to work on it. Brandon, as I shared that, anything that came to mind for you? Because I know we're always trying to grow and learn too.
I think one of the things that I feel like is when it comes to health, right? So this year has been a bit not going to the gym and doing those kind of things, and kind of just put it on the shelf, right? And it's time to open that box, start thinking about that again. So I'm excited for that, that piece, right? And it's, again, the world is moving, our lives are moving. So thinking about that. So
I love that question. Maybe this is our summary question. What box or what thing have you put in a box and put it on the shelf that you're ready to take it off the shelf and play with it? Put your imagination to work, figure out what the next season of your life looks like with that thing that you've just put on the shelf in a box, chosen not to ignore. And it's kind of like, we're at this time, it's spring, it's a year after the pandemic. Brandon got his first dose of his vaccine yesterday. I'm eligible to get mine pretty soon too. I'm younger than him, so I have to wait. But like, there are like new possibilities just in the world right now. There are things to be thinking about that you can say, this box that I closed, I'm ready to reopen it with emotionally, logically, seasonally, right? Maybe not all the boxes that are on the shelf need to be opened, but maybe there's one right now that you're like, yeah, I'm ready. Whether it's, working out like Brandon talked about, or something with your money, maybe it's something spiritually, maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's just a certain way of handling your money, right? We're Grandma's Wealth Wisdom, we think about money, but it doesn't have to be money. It could be something that's doesn't seem related to money, but could have a major impact on your future financially too, right? But yeah, I think, what is that box you're ready to take off the shelf? That's a great way to think about it. Thanks, Brandon.
I think that all of this is interconnected, like our relationships, how we see the world, and the money, how we see the world, or how we're told to see the world. Again, a lot of what we see or hear out there actually isn't true or accurate oftentimes. And so being able to question and say, is that really true? And living into that. Don't just assume all the answers, because we don't. If anybody says that they know all the answers, no,
just kidding.
I don't think so. And I think that, again, as we come into those relationships, those places, with humility, and knowing that place, we're going to go really far. And so thinking about that from our money, how we're changing in our lives, again, that older guy is saying, hey, you're in a different phase of life now. Enjoy it, right? I think that's okay, right? And so being in that place, and I think that was encouraging for him. So we're going to be doing these lives weekly, almost weekly, on Fridays around this time. So if you have, again, comments, if you like this, hit that thumbs up. We also want to grow our presence. So we want to get more people listening and being involved and stuff like that. So we've grown our channel to over 1,000 now. Subscribers, yeah. So now we're on to another phase of saying, okay, how many more people can we impact and help? Again, there's so many channels out there, but sometimes they're saying almost the exact same things over and over again. And we want to be a little different in this channel and saying, hey, what does it look like? This infinite banking thing, taking wisdom from other generations, and other pieces. So, but it'll be a lot about money, of course, but it intersects with all areas of our life. So,
yeah, because it's not really about money, even when it's about money, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's about the things that money allow you to do and the life that money allows you to live and the impact that money allows you to have. And we never want to lose sight of those things.
Yep, exactly. So with all that, you want to close with our tagline and peace us out?
Yeah. So thanks for joining us. Again, please be sure to subscribe, hit that like button. If this content today has been inspiring to you, please share it with someone else, pay that gift forward. And we'll see you next time to help you break through to a smart, stable financial future using the tried and true wisdom of the generations past.